Welcome to the Hip Replacement Podcast. I'm Chris Bystriansky, your host. I've had both my hips replaced, and I'm about 10 years past one of my hip replacement surgeries and 12 years past my other hip replacement surgery. And in that time, I've done some great things. I've done Ironman triathlons. I've done some other endurance events and just led a pretty active and healthy lifestyle. And today we're going to talk about something that is really important, I think, in the recovery process. I know a lot of us, we keep ourselves busy with what we're going through, but a lot of us have support of other people, whether it's a spouse or a family member or a friend, who actually go through this process with us. And today, if you're watching on video, you can actually see somebody sitting next to me right here. And I want to introduce you to my wife, Allison. And Allison was with me the whole process, from being very active in the years way before my surgery to watching my activity reduce and reduce and reduce, and then finding out that I needed a hip replacement surgery, and then going through the surgery and the recovery process. And I honestly would not be sitting here, and I would not have had the results that I've had after either one of my surgeries if it weren't for my wife, Allison. You know, she's been a great wife by my side for a long time, and also she was a great nurse for several months after surgery, and maybe even a little bit of a psychiatrist or a mental doctor to help me get a hold of myself when things I thought weren't going as fast as they could or the way things I wanted to go. So thank you very much, Allison, for being here and for all the help you've given me over the years. Now, this is something very strange, all right? I've asked Allison what she did when I was in surgery. So waking up from surgery in the post-operating room and the days right after surgery, I was asking her, like, hey, what did you do how long was I out? And what did you do while I was out? And she gave me answers, but honestly, that's all we've ever talked about the surgeries. So I've never really asked her, what were you going through? How was this experience for you? What were your concerns? And today, right now, for the first time ever, we're going to talk about what it was like for Allison, my spouse, going through my hip replacement surgeries, because it's important. I mean, she was such an integral part, and I'm sure you have somebody who's integral to your recovery. And let's get her perspective. All right. So maybe you want to ask your spouse, your friend, your family member, hey, what did you go through? Or, hey, maybe consider this because Allison went through it, or Allison had these things to say. So with that, let me just ask Allison the same question I asked her twice, once about 12 years ago and once about 10 years ago. So Allison, what did you do while I was having the opportunity to go through the hip replacement surgery? So what did you do?
Well, first, thank you for having me on the podcast. I appreciate it. And hopefully the answers I give will be helpful to those of you who are listening and going through something similar. Great question. I sat in the waiting room and waited for the surgeon to come out, or, the surgeon's representative to come out and give me updates. I think I may have been a little more laid back about it than the average person, because I work in the healthcare industry and had been exposed to hospitals and surgeries and health systems in my prior experience. And I'd actually observed some surgeries in an operating room. So had a little bit of exposure and had gone through some orthopedic surgeries of my own. So knew a little bit of what to expect. However, When it's someone that you love going through that, and there's always, an element of uncertainty, there can always be something that goes wrong. Of course, I was worried and a little apprehensive, and just, I prayed and hoped that everything would go well and that Chris would come out on the other side of the surgery with a hip that was better than what he even had before he began experiencing pain.
Well, I'm glad you weren't too concerned about it, because I was scared as hell. I'll tell you that. And remember, I said that she was part psychiatrist or mental health doctor, because I was a wreck for a while, and she didn't really come out and say, quit being such a baby. But she was a rock for me to lean on at a time when I really needed the support, because I was not happy about having the hip replacement surgery. I got to tell you that. So, great. You weren't that concerned because you had some experience in it. Good partner to have going through this. So, well, great. What were some of your concerns? I mean, you saw me being very active 5, 10, 15 years before the surgeries. And what were your concerns about the results of the hip replacement surgery? And were you going through anything else around the time of the first hip replacement surgery that maybe you were concerned about?
Why, yes, I was. Thank you for asking. So what Chris is referring to is that I was maybe like 7 months pregnant or more pregnant when he went through, maybe even like 8 months pregnant when he went through his first hip surgery. So here I am, with this big belly, my first child, and sleeping overnight in his hospital room on like an adjustable cot type thing. So not the most comfortable thing in the world, but it was doable. So yes, I had some other things that were keeping my attention. But you ask, what were some of my concerns post surgery? What would your recovery be like? So while I was sitting there waiting while you were in surgery, some of my concerns were, is everything going to go well? Is he going to get this specific hip that we were hoping that you would get, because Chris was part of a clinical trial where the physician was trying out a couple different hips. And one hip seemed to better fit your active lifestyle than the other. So that was a concern. Of course, the other concern is anything going to go wrong? Would something not, would there be a power outage? Things that you would never even think of that are likely not going to go wrong. But of course, it's kind of the standard things that people would be concerned about. Would you be able to get back to the activity that you had before? Would you be able to get down, how soon would you be able to get down on the floor and play with our baby that was soon to be born? Would you be able to run around with our child and, subsequent children after your surgery? Would the hip replacement allow that? Would you have to have another one, 20 years, 30 years down the road? So those were some concerns that I had.
Wow. That was a lot. I was just worried about waking up initially. So sounds like you had a lot on your mind. And you did bring up a different kind of hip, and we were hoping that I would get that specific hip. That is going to be the subject of a different episode. I was part of a study, just give you a quick preview. I was part of a study where I was I didn't know which one I was going to get. I was going to get either the standard polyethylene plastic liner inside my hip, or I was going to get a ceramic liner, which is something new in the US at the time, which theoretically would have lasted a lot longer. We'll talk about that a lot. We'll talk about that in a different episode. Quick ending though, I did get the ceramic one. So anyway, yeah, great concerns. I had a lot of those similar concerns and just so many, but my primary one was, am I going to wake up? I hear, I don't like getting cut. I don't like getting needles, and I've heard horror stories, and I was just really hoping that I would wake up from surgery and be there for my wife and child coming soon. So great answers. Now I went through this twice. about 18 months apart. Were your concerns different the second time around, knowing what you knew? You went through it. I know you had a little bit of a background in healthcare, a lot of bit of a background in healthcare and witnessing some type of surgery. I don't want to hear anything about surgeries though. I don't want to know. It's not for me. But were your concerns different the second time around?
Great question. And yes, absolutely they were. I wasn't as concerned the second time around. I knew what to expect. Same surgeon, so we knew what to expect from the surgeon and from his team, from the hospital. I guess a different concern is that now I had a 2-year-old, or however old our child was at the time. So just making sure that, she was where she needed to be and taken care of while Chris was going through the surgery, and making sure, I could be there for him when I needed to, when he needed me to be there, and yet, be there for our child when she needed me to be there, following his surgery as well.
Nice. Yeah. It was actually a lot easier for me the second time around as well, because I kind of knew what to expect. I knew what the recovery would look like. And I was getting great results from my first hip replacement surgery. So 18 months later, I was more comfortable. So with the first one, I was absolutely terrified going in. And with the second one, my mindset was, let's get this shit over with already. Sorry about the language. That was just my attitude. It's like, okay, let's go. Let's get it done. So yeah, I had a different mindset for the second one as well. And I do want to say that, having somebody to support me going through the recovery was absolutely huge. Let me just give you some examples. The first night, when I had my surgery, the first one was in the morning, and I was in the hospital overnight and then came home day 2, basically. And that first night I was home, my pain meds were not working the way they should have. And about midnight, I was in excruciating pain. And we had a phone number to call for the surgeon. It actually wasn't the surgeon. It was some answering service with some backup doctor. But that doctor was able to get me a prescription for some stronger or different pain meds. So at 1 a.m, my pregnant wife goes out to, the pharmacy, which thank goodness in our area, there was one relatively close that was open all night long. And she was able to get me some meds the first night I was home. And if it weren't for her or someone else supporting me, I would have been absolutely hosed and in pain for a while. Another thing that would happen that Allison was incredibly helpful for was, by day 3 after surgery, I just wanted to take a shower. I felt absolutely disgusting, and I had this big bandage on the front of my hip. And the doctor and the surgeon and the nurses and everybody who was taking care of me in the hospital said, don't worry about it. It is totally waterproof. And in my mind, I'm like, really? Is this really waterproof? If I go in the shower or in the tub, is this thing going to come off? Is it going to be wet underneath? Is it going to get infected? I was absolutely terrified. So I needed to take a shower though. And we had a walk-in shower. And what Allison and I decided to do was we got this plastic wrap and waterproof tape and basically taped my hip so that I could go stand kind of sideways in the shower and basically have the bandage area all dry. And I would not have been able to get that contraption set up with the tape and the plastic wrap by myself. So Allison helped me put all that stuff on so I could take a shower and feel a little bit normal and cleaner. And it was such an uplifting experience to be able to take a shower. And I've never taken a shower for granted since then, like I did before that. Another thing that she was incredibly helpful with was when I eventually got back to bed. Hold on, we're not going to go into those stories. This is something different. For the first 2 weeks, when I was home, I was sleeping in a recliner. And it was great because I would just kind of ease down in the recliner and then press a button and it would lay back, which was fantastic. But after about 2 weeks, I transitioned into a bed. But it was very difficult and painful to get my leg up into the bed. I mean, I did have a strap that I kind of used, but having Allison there to help me get that leg up without putting pressure on that joint was very, very helpful. So those three things were absolutely critical for me in my recovery. And Allison was such a huge support in all of that. So thank you for that. It's absolutely amazing. We haven't talked about this stuff ever. Maybe while it was going, maybe a little bit while something was going on, but it wasn't really like, oh wow, thank you. I need to be nicer to you because you did all these great things for me. But yeah. So would you say now? I mean, we're so far out. Okay, right. We're so far out. Would you say that life is finally back to normal? And if it's been back to normal for a long time, can you remember about when you thought that, wow, okay, I don't even remember the hip surgery. That was in the past. There doesn't seem to be any impact. When was normal? When did we get back to normal? If you can remember back then.
Sure. Well, I mean, what's normal, right? So, but I can recall that, thinking, I can recall looking back at a time to say, I don't even think about the surgeries anymore. It's as if you never even had them. And it was probably when our second child was, I don't know, year and a half-ish, because we were just normal life. We, husband, wife, two children, just going about life. And you were considering, I think you were already planning or considering doing your first Ironman triathlon.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And no, I did not get hit in the head and then start considering an Ironman triathlon. It was something that I wanted to do to just be active. And I kind of wandered into it by realizing I already did. One day I was going to go golf later in the day, but I showed up at the golf course early to swim. They had a pool, so I swam in the morning. And then I had some time to exercise, so I got on a stationary bike, a spinner bike, and then I went for the walk of the golf course. So I did a swim, a bike, and a walk, 7-mile walk. And it dawned on me that I kind of did a rudimentary, a basic triathlon. And then I just started doing research out of giggles at, hey, what's this Ironman nonsense all about? And that's how I started down the path of believing that I could eventually do an Ironman. So getting back to the point that you said, about a year and a half out from the birth of our second child, that's when things started to be a little bit normal. So what I was maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 years past my first surgery, and then 3 or 4 years past my second surgery. Is that about?
Now that you say that, I would say probably even sooner than our second child being a year and a half old. So I would say maybe at the most 2.5 years from your second surgery.
Okay.
I would say things were back to normal.
Yeah, it was like we didn't have time to think about the hip. I mean, the hips were in good shape. I was doing exercises and stretches. That it was good to get back to some normalcy, because if you've had kids, they just add a lot of chaos, and it's like a lot of times you have to put their needs first and just take care of them, because you kind of get in trouble if you don't. So yeah, it was good to get back to some normalcy, and having the kids certainly spurred that on, which is good.
Yeah.
So anything you would have done differently? Looking back, I mean, is there anything?
Yeah, I would have forced you to do the surgery sooner.
Okay.
You had a lot of hesitation, as you've already mentioned. Surgery was like not only a last option, but like the last option in your mind. And you found such a great surgeon who had a more novel procedure for performing the surgery that was better for someone who was seeking an active lifestyle. If we could have shortened the time frame of, I'm going to try all these different ways to make my hip feel better or maybe improve it. If we could have shortened that time and gotten to the surgery sooner so that you could have recovered sooner and, for your own physical and mental health, and been back to greater activity even earlier or even younger, then yeah, that's what I would have done differently.
So what you're saying is, in a very kind way, is that you wanted me to be out of pain sooner and not be such a baby about it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. See, good support. So any advice you might have for spouses out there or friends or family members who are supporting somebody who is either going to go through the surgeries, a surgery, or has gone through the hip replacement surgery?
Yeah. Couple things. Obviously, get your own sleep. Take care of yourself, because you won't be able to take care of the person who's going through the surgery or considering the surgery, if you're not also taking care of yourself. Do your own research. You may not be a researcher. Maybe the person thinking of or going through the surgery is more of a researcher or thinker, which is kind of how it is in our dynamic. Chris is much more of a researcher than I am, but do your own research. Find out, what it is that this hip replacement surgery would be, what the recovery timeframes would be. Talk to people who've gone through it. Find those people who have done it. Some may have been more or less successful than others, and find out from them, what made it more or less successful for them. Are they post hip replacement? Are they living a lifestyle that you or the person who's going through the surgery would want to be living? Because those are the people that you would want to learn from, not someone maybe who's struggling a little bit post hip replacement.
All good considerations. And I want to circle back to one of the things you mentioned in a previous statement, in that you would have encouraged me to have the surgery sooner and not have it be a last ditch effort. And there's something in there. There's something deeper. And I did try a lot of alternative treatments before we decided to do the hip replacement surgery. And great segue, because that is the subject of the next episode. I'm going to talk about all the different alternative treatments that I tried, because I was absolutely terrified of the surgery and I wanted to try to avoid it or delay it as long as possible. So that's going to be a good one. I went through a lot of different things, and I did delay the surgery doing all these alternative treatments. So look out for that when that one comes out. That is going to be the next podcast episode. But for today's, I thought that was a great conversation, Allison, and thank you very much for coming on as a guest and sharing your experiences and concerns as a spouse of someone who not only went through the surgeries once, but went through them twice and was absolutely terrified the first time around and really needed the support and the help that you provided perfectly. So thank you for that. And thank you, everyone, so much for tuning into the Hip Replacement Podcast. And until next time, I wish you the best recovery possible. Take care.